The old man walked into the courtroom in shackles, his shoulders bowed under the weight of a coat 2 sizes too big, his face hollow, his eyes cast downward. Not with shame, but with something deeper, quieter, older. "State your name," the clerk asked. The man didn't flinch. His voice, though graveled and low, cut through the silence like a blade. "Raymond Walk, Staff Sergeant, United States Marines." And for a moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. High on the bench, Judge Clara Monahan paled as her fingers froze mid-page. Because that name once belonged to the Marine who carried her brother through gunfire in Fallujah, and then vanished for 2 decades. He said nothing to defend himself, offered no excuses, only asked for 5 more minutes to finish a cold sandwich. But what happened next made the courtroom rise to its feet, made decorated veterans cry, and forced justice to look itself in the mirror. Because sometimes dignity wears wrinkles, and silence hides sacrifice. Stay with this story. Type honor if you believe forgotten heroes still deserve to be seen. And follow this channel if your heart still salutes what others walk past. Raymond Walk was 69 years old, but his body moved like it carried centuries. His back hunched not from posture, but from memories, and his hands, calloused, slow, worn thin, shook only when he tried to hold still. He stood about 5'9", though his frame had sunken beneath a weather-beaten military coat far too large, the sleeves nearly swallowing his fingers. His beard was thick, unkempt, more snow than salt, and his eyes had that distant, unreadable stare, like they were still scanning rooftops in Fallujah. Raymond didn't speak much, not because he had nothing to say, but because the world had long stopped listening. Pride wrapped around him like the last layer of armor he still trusted. He folded his blankets the same way every morning, tight corners, squared edges, just like field drills had taught him decades ago. At dawn, he'd walk 2 blocks to the vent behind Tommy Lane's diner, sitting cross-legged on the concrete to warm his hands in the steam. He never begged, never asked, only waited, sometimes for hours, until someone remembered to bring leftovers. He lived alone, slept beneath a rusted underpass, his only shelter a tarp tied with bootlaces. 21 years in the Marines. 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm, and Fallujah in all 4. His body bore more scars than medals, though even those had been stolen when his storage unit was auctioned off years ago. He carried his service in silence, even when the city walked past him like he didn't exist. Most days, no one looked twice, but one Tuesday morning, just before sunrise, a patrol car It was something colder. Indifference. The morning cold was biting. 28 degrees, wind cutting through the alley like a blade, when the squad car pulled up beside the Jefferson Street Cafe. Raymond Walk was where he always was at this hour, seated cross-legged on the concrete near the back vent, coat collar turned up, hands cupped around the last warmth left in a turkey sandwich Tommy Lane had slipped him through the kitchen door. A quiet ritual. No eye contact, no words. Just a nod between men who didn't need explanations. But this time, the silence didn't last. The officer stepped out briskly, heels cracking against the pavement. Young, polished, unbothered by the weather. "You again," he muttered with disdain. "Didn't we already warn you?" Raymond looked up slowly, lifting his eyes only halfway. "Just 5 minutes," he said softly, voice frayed but firm. "Not asking for much, just finishing lunch." But the officer wasn't listening. His hand shot forward, not to arrest, not to reason, but to slap the sandwich clean from Raymond's hand. It spun in the air and landed face down in a puddle of slush. Mayonnaise smeared into the concrete. Meat and lettuce scattered like trash. Raymond didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He didn't even look at the officer. Instead, he leaned forward, aching joints protesting with every inch, and reached out with 2 fingers to lift the soaked napkin first. He folded it neatly, corner to corner, Then again, like muscle memory that refused to die. Then, gently, he gathered the pieces of the sandwich one by one, placing them on the napkin like something sacred. People saw. I'm drawing. People saw. A man waiting for his coffee. A woman fumbling with her keys. A barista behind the glass. They saw everything and said nothing. No one moved. No one opened the door. Their silence was louder than any shout. You're trespassing, the officer barked. Again, you're done. Stand up. Raymond stayed still for a breath, then slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a rusted dog tag. He held it to the light, eyes unreadable. This used to mean something, he said quietly. Then he stood, not proud, not angry, just steady. No resistance. No plea. Only the napkin still in his hand. The cuffs clicked around his wrists. Metal on bone. His breath rose in white clouds as the officer turned him around. And still, no one moved. But inside the kitchen, Tommy Lane had been watching. His fists were clenched tight around a coffee pot. Jaw locked. When the door slammed shut and the cruiser pulled away, he stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and took a photo. One photo. Of the slush-stained sandwich lying abandoned on the ground. Of the imprint of boots where Raymond had sat. Of the silence left behind. And miles away, in a courtroom not yet prepared for what was coming, a judge would soon glance at a case file and stop breathing halfway through the first page. Because the name on that arrest sheet wasn't just another vagrant on the street. It was Staff Sergeant Raymond Walk, and the war he'd survived was about to walk straight into her courtroom. The courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of routine, papers rustling, attorneys conferring in hushed tones, the bailiff calling out docket numbers, like the rhythm of bureaucracy itself. Raymond sat hunched at the defense table, hands resting on his lap, wrists free now, but marked red from the cuffs. His coat hung limp off his shoulders, damp around the hem, eyes lowered as if staring through the floor. The judge hadn't even looked up yet. Her clerk flipped pages of the file. Case 47B, City of Newbridge, v. Raymond Walk. Wait. Charges: trespassing, resisting arrest, disturbing the peace. Just another homeless citation. Nothing about Fallujah. Nothing about the medals that were once pinned over his heart. Until the door opened. It was quiet. No slam, no stomp. Just the unmistakable sound of certainty entering a room. Leather shoes on old wood. The slow pull of a briefcase zipper. And then, the voice. Calm, precise, deliberate. Your Honor, Martin Hale. I've just been retained as legal counsel for the defendant. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the prosecutor looked up, eyebrows lifted with thin disbelief. The man at the podium was mid-40s, steel-gray suit, tailored to perfection, salt and pepper hair cut close, a wedding band polished and firm on his left hand. His gait had the exact pace of a man who'd never once been late in his life. His voice didn't ask for permission. It assumed relevance. The judge blinked. Mr. Hale. The court was not informed. A last-minute development, he said smoothly, setting his briefcase down with a quiet click. I respectfully request a recess to consult with my client. Raymond turned slowly, confusion etched into every fold of his face. He hadn't called anyone. Couldn't have. His fingers barely worked in the cold, and he hadn't touched a phone in weeks. He looked up at the stranger beside him, eyes narrowing. I don't have money for this. You won't need it, Hale replied, not looking at him. My firm is handling this pro bono. The room didn't exhale. It held its breath. On the judge's bench, her hand froze mid-page. Her eyes scanned the file again, and again, until the name stabbed through the blur of legal text, like a lightning bolt, through fog. Raymond Walk. She leaned back, lips parting slightly. Something inside her shifted. She knew that name. Not from a citation. Not from the street. From somewhere deeper. From war. From family. Hale turned to Raymond and said nothing more. But the weight of his presence filled the space between them, like sandbags before a storm. Outside, the clouds were already forming. And inside that silent courtroom, no one needed an introduction. Everyone knew what came next. The courtroom returned from recess with a quiet that didn't feel like order. It felt like something was holding its breath. Judge Clara Monahan sat behind the bench, her posture perfect, her eyes unreadable, though a faint tremble lingered at the tips of her fingers as she adjusted the file before her. Across the room, Raymond Walk sat unmoving, his coat still damp, his hands resting gently around a folded napkin. He hadn't spoken since the cuffs came off. But he didn't have to. The room carried the weight for him now. The prosecutor rose first, voice polished, tone dismissive. Your Honor, while Mr. Walk's military service is appreciated, the facts remain. He's been warned multiple times about loitering behind Jefferson Cafe. He refused to vacate when instructed. This is his third citation this year. We recommend 30 days community service and a no trespass order for the downtown area. Before the judge could respond, a voice came from the defense table. Low, precise, unflinching. Play the video. Martin Hale had risen, phone in hand, screen tilted slightly upward. He didn't look at the prosecutor. Didn't need to. The moment the screen lit up, the entire room turned toward him. On the video, the alley, the officer, the slap, a sandwich flying through the air, hitting the slush, Raymond stooping slowly, folding the napkin, saying nothing. And then, the cuffs. It wasn't long. 15 seconds, maybe. But it felt like a punch that never landed but still left bruises. When the clip ended, the courtroom didn't stir. Martin turned slightly, his voice softer now, but sharper. I submit this as context. The prosecutor hesitated. That doesn't prove intent. No, Hale said, but this does. He pulled a printed photo from his briefcase. A still image from the video. The moment, frozen. Sandwich in the slush. Cuffs tight around weathered wrists. And above them, the officer's hand, gripping the coat, a faint smirk still visible on his face. He held it up. 42,000 shares in 12 hours. It's on every screen in the city. The young officer from the video sat in the gallery, posture rigid. He looked up, trying to stay composed. But something cracked in his stare when the photo faced him. Martin took one slow step forward. You didn't just arrest a homeless man. You arrested a Marine who saved 6 lives under fire for finishing a sandwich behind a restaurant that fed him. He let the sentence land. Then, quieter, do you know who he is now? The officer didn't reply. The room remained silent. And for the first time, his eyes shifted, not with defiance, but calculation. The kind a man makes when he realizes he's no longer the most powerful person in the room. Under the amber dome of courtroom lights, silence stretched like wire, tight, humming with what no one dared say. The photograph lay face up on the bench. The video had already spoken. And now, no defense remained. Officer Brent Latimer sat stone still. The same hands that had cuffed Raymond Walk, now clasped together in his lap, white-knuckled, trembling ever so slightly. His collar suddenly looked too tight. His eyes scanned the wood grain in front of him, like he could disappear into it. Judge Monahan did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Officer Latimer, she said evenly. Did you, or did you not, physically strike Mr. Walk's food from his hand prior to issuing any command? He shifted, opened his mouth, closed it, then mumbled, I didn't think. That's not what I asked. More silence. Then, yes, ma'am. Martin Hale stepped forward again. Voice like slow stone, sliding into place. And did you inform dispatch of your detainment? No. Did you notify shelter services that Mr. Walk had been barred from the 4th Street corridor, effectively cutting him off from every available winter resource? A pause. I didn't think it was necessary. Exactly, Hale said. You didn't think. From the gallery, a murmur rose, low and ashamed. Someone whispered, I saw the clip. Didn't know it was him. Another voice followed. Tommy tried to tell us. Tommy Lane, the cafe cook, stood now in the back. His apron stained, hands still damp from dishwater. I gave him that sandwich, he said aloud. Been doing it for years. My father served with him in Iraq. Raymond never asked. He just sat quiet. I kept telling people. No one listened. The room stilled again. Judge Monahan's hand moved slowly across the bench. She pressed a button. A side door opened. From it stepped Captain Denise Rourke. Internal Affairs, full dress blues, flanked by 2 officers in plain uniform. Her posture was exact. Her presence, immediate. Officer Latimer, she said, tone flat. You are hereby relieved of duty pending formal review. Please stand. He didn't move. Now, the snap of cuffs echoed louder than the gavel ever could. One officer stepped behind him. Another reached for his sidearm and badge. His hands shook as he offered them. And for the first time, he looked up. Not at the judge, not at Hale, but at Raymond Walk. Raymond didn't speak. He didn't nod. He didn't blink. But the message was clear. Across the room, people lowered their eyes. The clerk looked away. A young intern wiped the corner of her eye. One juror whispered to another, We watched it happen, and did nothing. Latimer was let out. Past every face that once might have looked away. Now they followed him, not with anger, with shame. The door shut behind him with a final thud, and in the silence that followed, Raymond Walk sat still, the only man in the room with nothing left to prove. The courtroom hadn't moved for a full minute after the door shut behind Officer Latimer. The air hung heavy, like a church after the final hymn, full of silence that didn't come from peace, but from weight. Raymond Walk sat still, spine straight, hands folded around the same napkin he'd held when the cuffs came off. He didn't speak. He didn't look up, but his presence, calm, unbent, filled every corner of that room louder than any gavel could. It started small. A middle-aged woman near the back, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, navy cardigan, stood. No words. She just walked slowly toward the defense table, paused, and placed a folded scarf on the edge beside Raymond. Then returned to her seat. A man in a maintenance uniform cleared his throat, voice rough from disuse. I used to serve him coffee. Never knew his name. Never asked. He looked down, then nodded once, as if to himself. No one clapped. No one spoke up. But something had shifted. One by one, people who'd once looked through Raymond now struggled to meet his eyes. A young intern from the DS office pushed forward from the gallery. She didn't speak either, just left a takeout cup of coffee on the corner of the table. Still hot. Still steaming. Tommy Lane, the cook, stepped forward again. This time with no apron, just his coat on. Dad used to say you don't salute with your mouth, he said quietly. You salute with what you remember. He held out his hand. Raymond looked at it, then stood. Their handshake was quiet. Firm dolor. And it meant more than any medal. Judge Monahan stayed silent on the bench, her hands folded now, eyes locked on Raymond. But not as a judge, as a sister, as a witness. And then came the sound no one expected. Footsteps. From the side chamber. Captain Rourke had returned, but not alone. Behind her, a Marine colonel in full dress blues stepped forward, his chest a mosaic of ribbons and bars. His stride was slow, deliberate, carrying something rectangular in polished oak. The young corporal beside him held a file. A folded flag rested atop it. The judge finally stood. Mr. Walk, she said, her voice even, reverent. Before we proceed with dismissal, there's someone who needs to see you. Raymond didn't react until he saw the patch. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. His breath hitched, barely noticeable. But it was there. The colonel stepped forward, opened the case, and turned it outward. Inside, the Navy Cross, set against blue velvet. Beside it, a small bronze plaque, freshly engraved. His name, his rank. April 17th, 2004. The room didn't gasp. It just stilled. Raymond looked at it, eyes glinting under courtroom light. He didn't smile, didn't cry, just whispered, "It wasn't just me." The colonel nodded once. "But it was you who stayed." From the back, a teenage boy stood. No relation, no reason, just watching. He placed his hand over his heart. Quietly. Others followed, one by one, not out of pity, but out of remembrance. And somewhere deep in that silence, Raymond whispered words he hadn't said aloud in 20 years. "This place used to feel like home. Maybe it can be again." The diner on Jefferson Street used to blend into the block. Just another aging storefront with flickering lights and a cracked tile floor. But now, a soft bronze plaque rested near the door. Polished by hand, not time. It didn't shout. It didn't explain. Just 5 words etched into the metal, in quiet honor of Raymond Walk. Next to it, an old photo, grainy, black and white, captured a much younger man in uniform, jaw set, eyes steady, arms wrapped around 2 wounded Marines in desert dust. Above it all, a fresh American flag now flew. Not from obligation, but because someone from the neighborhood had replaced the tattered one without being asked. Inside, near the corner booth where Raymond had once sat just to stay warm, a small wooden frame hung on the wall. Behind the glass, a folded napkin, still creased, still marked with his initials in faded ink. R.W. the cook. Tommy Lane never told anyone he'd kept it. But he'd seen enough wars in the kitchen to know that not all memorials belonged to battlefield. No ceremony had marked these changes. No mayoral speech, no photo op patois. Just hands, quiet, working hands, who repaired what silence had once broken. Veterans from town stopped by with their caps in hand. One high school history teacher assigned a paper. "Find someone who made your freedom possible." Dozens of students came asking for stories. They found them not from Raymond himself. He never offered details, but from others. A bailiff who spoke of a courtroom frozen in stillness. A teenager who remembered the weight of that salute. A cafe worker who'd once turned him away, and now left him coffee on the steps every Thursday at sunrise. The story spread. Someone filmed a tribute and posted it online. No dramatic music, no narration. Just still frames, courthouse light through stained windows, the moment he stood in silence while others saluted. It went viral for all the reasons no one could name. Comments flooded in, not with outrage, but with apology, with gratitude, with stories of other forgotten heroes. Names began surfacing. Men and women who had once been Raymonds in their own towns. The ripple had started. Quiet. Tight. Permanent. At the local middle school, a boy named Eli started holding the door open every morning. Said it was for Mr. Walk. Said heroes don't always come home to medals, but maybe they should at least come home to manners. His classmates followed suit. It became a thing, a quiet tradition. Raymond himself never explained any of it. When asked, he'd shrug, maybe nod, but his eyes, the old, steady eyes, carried every answer that words never could. He never asked for recognition. He never corrected the details. But every week he returned to the diner. Same seat, same quiet. And when the young came to say, "Thank you," he'd just listen. Sometimes he'd smile. Mostly he'd listen. One afternoon, just before closing, the lights caught a new frame on the far wall. It held nothing flashy. Just a photograph. Raymond standing at attention, shoulders back, face unreadable, flanked by 2 generations of Marines. Beneath it, a single caption. He stayed. No applause. No music. Just the low hum of the ceiling fan, and the sound of a town remembering not just what happened, but who they had almost forgotten. And in the far corner, Raymond glanced at the photo once, then quietly nodded. The cafe near 7th Street had long since quieted. Its dinner rush passed, leaving only the hush of dishes being stacked in the kitchen, and the occasional soft whir of a ceiling fan pushing warm air across the room. In the far corner, by the window where dusk melted slowly through dusty blinds, 2 men sat without words. One older, his back a little curved, his shoulders wrapped in a weathered green coat that seemed to carry the weight of decades. The other younger, sharper in outline, but no less worn in spirit, his gaze cast downward into the untouched glass of iced tea resting between his elbows. For a long while, neither spoke. And yet the silence wasn't empty. It held breath, memory, space for things once buried too deep for language. Raymond Walk shifted slightly in his seat, the faint creak of leather beneath him marking time, and his son, Chris, finally looked up. Not as a soldier, not as a defender in court, but simply as a man searching his father's face for something he thought had been lost to the years. "You all right, old man?" he asked, not teasing, not rhetorical, but as if the answer still mattered more than anything he might say next. Raymond didn't answer right away. He exhaled through his nose, eyes fixed on the slow dance of tree shadows outside the window. And then, with a voice roughened by wind, war, and time, he replied, "I didn't think I'd ever be, but today felt like air again." Today felt like air again. Chris didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply reached into his coat, pulled out a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth, and set it gently on the table between them, with the kind of reverence most reserve for folded flags or last letters home. Raymond unwrapped it slowly. His old Marine cover, still creased at the edges, its stitching frayed, the inside marked faintly with his initials, like a whisper from a past that refused to vanish. He held it for a moment, thumb moving across the brim as if tracing ghosts, then placed it back down, turning it so it faced Chris, not himself. Across the cafe, the waitress paused in her sweeping, glanced over, then quietly looked away. There was nothing to serve here. Nothing to interrupt. Outside, the wind shifted, and the flag across the street caught the light. "I always thought I disappointed you," Chris said, voice barely above breath, "for walking away, for not re-enlisting, for not being you." Raymond's eyes met his son's, not hard, not proud, but full of a stillness that could only come from surviving things no one should ever have to survive. "I never needed you to be me," he said. Slow, deliberate. "I just needed to know you were still coming home." The jukebox in the corner, untouched for months, hummed to life on its own, an old country tune drifting into the room like a forgotten prayer. Neither man moved. Neither looked away. And then, quietly, almost without thinking, Chris reached out, placed his hand over the cover, fingers grazing the edge of his father's. No more words were needed. When they stood to leave, the only sound was the soft chime of the door and the rustle of Raymond's coat as it brushed the frame. And behind them, on the table, the Marine cover remained, resting not as a relic, but as a bridge between everything that had been broken and everything that somehow still held. It didn't happen with headlines. There was no parade, no city proclamation, no moment where everyone clapped and said, "He's the one." What happened instead was quieter, but it carried farther. At the local barber shop on Maple Avenue, where the walls were still hung with framed photos from wars gone by, someone pinned up a small newspaper clipping beside the register. No title, no author, just a reprint of a courtroom sketch and the sentence, "No Marine gets left behind." People stopped and stared. One man took off his hat. Another looked down and whispered, "That was Walk, wasn't it?" At the high school across town, a history teacher changed her Thursday lesson. She brought in a worn military jacket, green, faded, too large for any of the students. She told them about service and silence, and how sometimes the people who say the least carry the most. A boy in the back row, usually restless, stayed after class to ask where the man lived now. At the 4th Street diner, someone quietly raised the flag again. It had been missing for months, blown down. No one bothered to fix it. But now, every morning, before coffee is poured or the grill turned on, a teenager in an apron steps outside, unfurls the stars and stripes, and stands there for a moment before raising it. No one told him to. He just started. In the church bulletin, where bake sales and prayer lists usually filled the page, there was suddenly a small box in the corner. "Thank you, Mr. Walk, for what you did, for who you are. We see you now." The pastor never mentioned it aloud, but the next Sunday, during the silence before the benediction, he looked toward the back pew where Raymond sometimes sat, and nodded once, eyes full. Raymond never spoke of it. He never asked for any of it. But Chris did. He told the story when a local school invited him. He read from the transcripts. Let the facts speak for themselves. He didn't dramatize. He didn't embellish. And that made people lean in closer. A few students cried. One girl asked if she could write her college essay about him. Even the library joined in. A small shelf now holds a folded flag, a copy of the court records, and the Silver Star citation that had once been misplaced for years. The display doesn't scream. It whispers. But it's enough. Now, when someone says, "Frank Walk," no one laughs. No one looks away. They just nod. Some lower their voice. Some put a hand over their heart without even realizing. And at the edge of town, near the bus stop where Raymond once waited in silence, every winter morning, a boy sat with a sketchbook on his lap, drawing from memory the face of an old Marine he'd never spoken to, but had heard about everywhere. Behind him, a flag flapped gently in the cold air. No music played. No one watched. But something was still moving, and it wasn't done yet. The apartment was quiet, touched by golden afternoon light. Raymond stood before the only frame on the wall. His navy cross, flanked by 2 purple hearts, aged and real. The medals had been lost once, forgotten in a storage unit. But now, they'd come home. He adjusted his collar in the mirror, slow and deliberate. Then a knock. Olivia stood there, no robes, just herself, holding a box of letters. "From Jack," she said softly. They sat in silence, reading what the past had left behind. Words of loyalty, of fire, of fear, and of one man who never left anyone behind. Raymond didn't say much. He never did. But as he traced the ink of Jack's final sentence, his lips moved without sound. Outside, snow fell gently. A boy walked past, stopped, and stared at the window, at the man behind it. He didn't wave, just placed his hand on his heart and walked on. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with stillness and someone remembering your name. If this story made you pause, even for just a breath, type honor below. And if you believe the quiet ones carry the weight for all of us, this is where their voices live. Stay, listen, and walk with them.